Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, our second edition webinar. We welcome you all here from Accosca, and I send my sincere greetings to my fellow Africans from the eastern parts of Africa, from the western parts of Africa, from the southern parts of Africa, and our dear friends from Canada. We welcome you from the States and the Asia. It is indeed my pleasure to have yet again another session prepared in conjunction with Accosca on today's topic, which is helping members weather the COVID storm through financial counseling programs. My name is Grace Sharon Watiera. I am the head of programs in Accosca, and together with me will be Maureen and Joanne, who will be supporting with the technical works behind the scenes to ensure that the session runs smoothly. Now, just to set the stage, I believe that it is in the aftermath of disruptions, such as we are finding ourselves in today, that the demand for financial counselors is perhaps at its most acute. Indeed, their work is to provide advice and support to all our members and even institutions when faced with difficult financial dilemmas. So we thought this is a very relevant topic that both our members, our leaders, and indeed the institutions at large will benefit from. So what are some of the dilemmas that our members would often face during certain times such as this? One, you'd find that members who have borrowed today are in a dilemma on how I will pay back my circle, in view of the fact that for whatever reason, my income has either reduced, or there are layoffs that are looming, or any other scenarios of disasters, not just necessarily a pandemic like that is facing us today. Indeed, we are here hopefully to shed more light on some of those concerns that we might have, and eventually have some takeaways, key learning lessons that we might pick up and share and implement in our various institutions. To start us off, I'll probably briefly just take you through the ground rules. It is important for us, especially to have quality transmission as participants, ensure that our phones are muted and our computers are muted as well, especially when you're not speaking. For your comfort, the webinar is being recorded and therefore it will be shared later on our website. So feel free to later engage with us through our website, where you will find the webinar posted there. We also encourage our participants to communicate throughout the session using the chat box that is provided on your screen. Type in as many questions as possible, and together with the technical team, we will try our best to respond to them. For those that will not be able, be sure to note that we will extend those engagements over and beyond this session. And finally, for those that have or are using their mobile phones, look out for a question mark icon or just the word question on your screen, on your phone, and that would, when you click that, then it would help you type in any of your comments or your queries. Okay. So please allow me now to welcome our speaker of the day, Mark Lynch. Mark is a co-founder of CU Difference, which is a consulting company in the US. Their main mission is to help credit unions and circles identify ways to better serve their members, their communities, and also promote the overall well-being and prosperity of those institutions. Indeed, Mark has been a credit union member for over 40 years and served as a board director for 22 years. He therefore carries with him an extensive experience in developing programs and services aimed at helping and addressing the needs of members, particularly from low-income households. I strongly believe that his experience, his insights and knowledge that will come through during this session will form part of our key learning takeaways as leaders involved in decision making, or as staff and members who will be implementers of these decisions. Indeed, as an overall benefit to our institutions. I would now take this opportunity to welcome Mark. Mark, it's my pleasure to welcome you for this session to take us through this topic entitled Helping Members Weather the COVID Storm Through Financial Counselling Programs. Over to you, Mark.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Grace, and it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you today about this important topic. And again, thank you for the opportunity to give you some insight into the work that I've done around financial counselling. So Grace gave you a little bit of my background, as she said, and as you can hear from the accent, I'm originally from Australia. I spent a lot of time in Australia involved in credit unions and with the Credit Union Foundation in Australia. I've lived in the US for the last 16 years, and for much of that time, I've worked very closely with Lois Kitch, who is my colleague at CU Difference, who many of you will know from her work in Africa over recent years. And one of the things that working with Lois and also working with the National Credit Union Foundation here in the US, for the last 10 years, I've been working on a program to actually train credit union staff to become certified financial counselors. And so for a lot of the work that I've done over that 10 years has been around, you know, what makes a good counsellor, how do you train counsellors, and also how can a credit union, once they've trained those counsellors, how can a credit union, or in your case a SACO, use those skills to the betterment of not only the members but also the credit union. And so what I'm going to talk to you today about is a lot about what I've learned, and hopefully a lot of it will translate to the work that you do with your members, and that you might be able to do learning from the experience of US credit unions who have done a lot of work in this area. So Maureen, if we can go to the next slide. So this might sound pretty basic, but what is financial counselling, and what is financial counselling mean, particularly in times of a pandemic? So one of the things that I've been talking to credit unions here in the US over the last couple of months about is, you know, did you have a good feel for the financial challenges your members might have faced before the pandemic actually hit? And if you did, then you might have a better idea what's happened since the pandemic. But if you didn't really know what those challenges were before, it makes it a little bit more difficult to know what those challenges are now. So as Grace mentioned, you know, we know that the pandemic has led to people losing their jobs. So, if it's a one-income family and that job is lost, then clearly there's a severe impact on that person and that family. Also, the pandemic has brought not only job losses, but lots of dislocation, lots of rules, lots of quarantining, lots of different things have happened which have led to not only financial challenges, but lots of other challenges. And then in addition to that, that has brought on a whole lot of stress in people's lives. And so members, in many cases, are not only having to cope with financial challenges, but they're having to cope with lots of other stressful challenges as well. And as SACOs, what are the things that we can do to help our members in as many ways as possible cope with all of these challenges, but specifically the financial challenges. And one of the things that I'm also finding is that there are lots of negative things about the pandemic and the way that it has affected lots of countries around the world and lots of people around the world, is that it has helped people refocus. I just know from myself and from my family and my friends that, the impact of the pandemic has made us rethink a lot of things, including our finances. What are the things that are important? What are the things that perhaps aren't as important? And so when we think about our members and we think, over the past few years in particular, they've thought a certain way about things. They've thought a certain way about their finances. They've thought a certain way about what they have planned for the future. And what I think you might find is that the pandemic is making people think a little differently. And so when we think about, I don't think our members are really up for financial counselling. I'm not sure whether they'll talk to us about their finances. What you might find is that all of the changes that have been brought about by the pandemic have actually changed people's mindset, and you might find that they're thinking a little differently. So making assumptions could be very dangerous. So let's talk about what financial counselling actually is. And financial counselling, and this is where I'm going to introduce you to the terminology of financial counselling. And in every culture and in every country, words and the interpretation of words can make a huge difference. So I know from here in the US and even from Australia, the word counselling can have some negative connotations. When you say to some people counselling, their thought process could immediately go to, they think that there's something wrong with me and I need special help. And people might resist that notion or that connotation. So a lot of credit unions that do this sort of work for their members don't actually promote it as financial counseling. They tend to use the term coaching or mentoring. So as we go through the presentation today, when I talk about counseling or coaching, they're essentially the same thing, but the way that we talk about and promote it to members could make a huge difference. So we can talk internally within our SACOs about our financial counseling program, but when we're actually talking to members or talking about what we do, we might actually refer to it as a coaching program or a mentoring program. So that's the first piece that I think is important in starting this conversation. And then the second thing is counseling, as I said, can sometimes give the impression that the credit union or SACO thinks that I have a problem, that I might be going to cause the SACO a problem. So how can you get around this notion that if I need help, then I must have a problem? And so financial counseling or financial coaching is actually applicable to all members, no matter what their financial position is at all. So think about your members and try and think of them in 3 different categories. And those that might need remedial counseling, those that might need preventative counseling, and those that might need productive counseling. So remedial counseling is those members that really do have a problem. They have too much debt, they probably have no savings, they probably don't have a budget or a spending plan, and they really are struggling. They're behind in their finances. And clearly, coaching or counseling can help those members. Preventative counseling is where a member is not in immediate trouble, but they're really walking that fine line. You know, they have a job, they're getting paid, and that pay, by the time it comes to the next payday, the money is all gone. And if some emergency or something comes up, then they're in trouble. You know, they suddenly fall into that remedial category. So preventative counseling or coaching is for your members that are sort of living on the edge. One issue could put them over the edge and have them facing either minor or major financial problems. And then productive coaching or counseling is where members are actually doing okay. They're actually able to manage their finances. They have some savings. Their debt is pretty much under control. Good savings plan, but they could do better. No matter how good we are at managing our finances, we can always improve. And so, you know, you will find that there are members who are doing okay, but would really like to do better. And so when you think about these 3 categories, all of your members, every single member will fit into one of these 3. And you don't really need to put a label on every member immediately. You know, once you talk to a member and they explain their finances to you, you'll get a really good idea then whether you're doing remedial, preventative, or productive counseling. But whatever type of counseling you're doing, all of the same principles apply. So think of financial counseling or financial coaching is helping every member improve. And you can do that using those same principles. And the one last thing I'll say about this is that there was a study done here in the US, and I think this would apply to most countries and most cultures, in that credit union members here in the US know 3 or 4 things that they could do to improve their finances. So they actually have a good idea of how to manage their finances, but they don't do them. And so that's where this coaching piece becomes really important, because you're not necessarily telling a member something or helping them make better decisions about their finances because they don't know. You're actually a coach. You're motivating them to actually do things that they know they should do, but they just don't do them because they don't have someone in their corner cheering them on. So think of a financial coach as a motivator and cheerleader as much as an educator and a facilitator. All right, Maureen, next slide. So the next piece I want to talk about is what I mentioned a little while ago about not making assumptions about your members and not making assumptions about their challenges or what they think about finances and discussing finances with someone at their SACO. So it sometimes is really helpful if, first of all, you can get a better idea of the challenges that members are facing. So one of the things that I've learned through the way that the pandemic has affected people where I live here in Michigan in the US is that there are some members who have been negatively affected quite dramatically. It might be a family, 2 incomes, suddenly they've lost 2 incomes and they are really struggling. On the other hand, I know families where they haven't lost their jobs, they still have jobs, they still have incomes, they're actually working from home, and they're actually saving money from working from home. They're saving money because they can't go out to restaurants. They're saving money because they can't go to the movies or do other things. And so their financial position has actually improved as a result of the pandemic. So everybody is affected in different ways. So how is each member affected, and how do you give them an opportunity to make their own assessment? So not just you assessing their financial health, but also helping them understand where they fit. And people have different perceptions about themselves and their finances, and sometimes those perceptions are very accurate, and sometimes their perceptions are really way off. So helping members make a really good assessment of their finances and their financial position might be a good way to get started. And it's also a good way to encourage them to use a coach at their SACO. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you an idea of just a tool, and there are lots of these different sorts of online tools that can help your member assess their financial position. So next slide, please, Maureen. So this is a site here in the US from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which helps people here in the US actually get an idea of their financial position and also compare it with other people in the country. So I'm going to walk you through this particular tool just very quickly. But what you can also do is on this slide, you'll see a link to this website, and you can actually go to this website if you're on a computer now, and you can type in this website into your browser. You can actually do this. No one else is going to see it. No one's going to know. You can actually answer these questions as we go through, or after the webinar, you can go to this site. You can try it out then. So next slide, please, Maureen. So what this does is it's in 2 parts, 2 series of questions, and it makes a statement, and then it asks you how that statement would describe you. So for example, it says, I could handle a major unexpected expense. And then you answer, I could completely, I very well, somewhat, very limited, not at all. And then the other statements, I'm securing my financial future because of my money situation. I feel like I will never have things I want in life. I can enjoy life because of the way I'm managing my money. I'm just getting by financially. I'm concerned that the money I have or will save won't last. So they're the questions that you're asked in part 1. And as I said, you choose the answer that best fits you. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Maureen. So then part 2, again, asks you how often this statement might apply to you. So giving a gift would put a strain on my finances for the month. I have money left over at the end of the month. I am behind with my finances. My finances control my life. So again, these statements are really key statements which your member is giving key answers to. And then and to be honest with you, I'm not certain why there is an age group difference. My guess is that that's got to do with how close a person is in the US to retirement, and how their savings would last if they're young versus if they're close to retirement. And then basically, if you're answering for yourself, you click the left side. Once you click your age, you click get my score. So if we go to the next slide, please, Maureen. And then it gives you a rating. So the rating that would get you a score of 50 is if you click the middle box. So think of all those questions, and the middle, right down the middle, the one that was sort of a yes and no type answer, that will get you a score of 50. And so this is sort of saying, if you're further over into the green, it means that you're in a better financial position. If you're over towards the red, you're in a more serious financial position. And as you can see, the average in the US is 54. So it's, when you think about all of the people in the US, basically this is saying that people here are living on the edge. And we actually know that that's around 75% of people in the US live from paycheck to paycheck, and about the same number have very little savings. So even hugely developed country like the US, even going into the pandemic and now as a result of the pandemic, lots of people face huge financial challenges, and clearly need credit unions in this country to have staff who are trained to be able to help them. All right, next slide. So what this site then does is it has a whole lot of tools and information that would help people who go through this test to test their finances to then go to the next step. And this is like an online coaching service. But it's also used by financial counselors here in the US to walk their members through to help their members understand whether or not they need remedial, preventative, or productive counseling and coaching. All right, next slide. So when we think about, okay, we're going to work closely with our members by providing a coaching service to help them improve their finances. So the first thing I like to talk about when it comes to, okay, we like this idea, we think our members need it, we think they'll like it. What is the goal? What do we want to achieve, and how do we want to achieve those goals in particular? And sometimes credit unions or SACCOs, when they think about this, they think, if I help a member who has financial stresses, then that might hurt the credit union, because if I help them, that might mean that they can't pay their loans. And one of the important principles of financial counseling or coaching is that you're helping the member repay all their loans and all their debts and do the right thing by all of their creditors. You're not providing a magic wand that makes all of their debts disappear and solve their financial problems. Think of counseling or coaching as a win-win type of service or program for your credit union. It's good for the member because it helps the member improve their finances, and it's good for the credit union because we're helping the member repay their loan to the credit union. And one of the really important things, and if you were on Lois's webinar last week, is unless you have a financially stable credit union, unless members are borrowing responsibly and repaying their loans, you're not going to have a SACCO or credit union to be able to provide loans or provide coaching in the future. So this type of program is really good for the member, but done correctly, it's really good for the credit union. It's good for the credit union's bottom line. It's good for the credit union's stability. And it's also good for the credit union's growth, because credit unions that do this find that people are attracted to credit unions who provide these types of services for their members. All right, next slide. So one of the things that I often hear is, you know, if we do this sort of thing, I don't think our members will talk to us. You know, there's this taboo about money, and, you know, some people don't like talking about money. And added to that, you know, do they really want to talk to their SACO about their money, particularly if they're having problems? You know, will that mean that when they need a loan, when they want a loan, the SACO will say, well, you're not really managing your finances appropriately, therefore we're not going to lend you the money. And so what I've learned is that all cultures have people who are shy of talking about finances. It's a taboo in all races, all over the world. But everywhere that I've seen this done, it's able to be overcome. And it's overcome in particular, partly by what I talked about earlier about coaching rather than counseling, and making it positive rather than negative. This is something for everyone. It's not aimed at members who can't manage their finances, or members who are having financial difficulties. So it's really important when promoting this particular program to believe that your members will talk to you about this. Okay, there might be some that won't, and there might be some that are nervous about it at first. But if it's positioned as being, this is for everyone, to help them improve their finances, to get to a better place, then that takes that negative component out of it. You know, if you're one of these people that doubts whether they will, I think you might be surprised. And over the last 10 years working with credit union staff, I've heard this over and over again. You know, my members won't talk to me about their finances, and then they go out and they start a program, and then I talk to them and they say, wow, you know, they're more than happy to talk to me about their finances. And then another story I can tell you is that my wife, who works for a credit union, went through the training program several years ago. And one of the things that I say to credit union staff learning to be financial coaches is, don't forget about your staff. Maybe the way to start this program is to offer these services to your staff. And when I said this to my wife, she said, nobody on my staff will talk to me about their finances. They're never going to open up to me. I work with them. I work side by side with them. You know, that's never going to happen. And then over the years, she's had lots of staff who have said to her, I really need some help. Can I talk to you? So members will surprise you, and you don't know until you try, until you ask them. So what are the skills that you need as a coach or a counselor? What are the things that are important to know to be able to talk to members about their finances, to help them improve their finances? And I divide it into three categories: information or knowledge, skills, and then the process that you use. So information and knowledge, it's really important if you're going to sit down and help a member, is that you know what you're talking about. You know about budgeting, that you know about savings principles, that you know about debt management, that you know about lots of things that the member might not know about money management or about community services that might help them. Or it might be that what's really important for some members is having a better understanding about the taxes that they pay or that they don't pay, or it might be that they need to know more about life skills that will help them be better at managing their money. So information and knowledge isn't important. You want your staff who are going to be working with members to have all the information they need and all the knowledge that they need to be able to help a member. Now, the other thing I will say about this is that credit union staff, particularly those that have worked in your SACO for a number of years and have done a range of jobs, probably have almost all of the information and knowledge they need to do this right away. If you have staff at your SACO who are new, then they might need to learn some of this information and knowledge. The second part is skills, and not everyone has these skills naturally, but some people do. You know, some people are naturally or have trained themselves to be very empathetic. Or the flip side of empathetic is being judgmental. So being non-judgmental, being empathetic, being able to walk in the members' shoes, not say, well, you know, if I can manage my money, why can't they? You know, understanding the challenges that members face, understanding the members that a specific member might face. So empathy is crucial, is a really important skill for financial coaches to have. Another really crucial skill is to be a good listener. One of the immediate downfalls I find of well-trained coaches is they're filled with so much knowledge and so many skills that they can't wait to get out and work with members and tell them about all of these things that they've learned. And they can make the mistake of doing too much talking and not enough listening in the early days. So it takes a lot of discipline for some people to be good listeners, but it's really important. And the reason it's important is that to be a good coach, you've got to know the member that you're coaching. You've got to know who they are, what the challenges are, why those challenges came about, what their the things that they're saying that give you positive things to work about, the negative things that they're saying that you need to help them work on. And so to get lots of good information that you need to be a good coach, you need to be a good listener. And then once you've got the information and you know as much as you can about the member that you're helping, then you need to be a good communicator. You need to have good communication skills. And one of the really important things about being a coach is not telling the person what to do. It might be giving them ideas and it might be giving them suggestions, but you're not telling them you must do this and you must do it this way. You are communicating things that they could do and things that they might think about doing, and then motivating them to choose the right course for them. And one of the, just slightly digressing for a moment, but one of the important things about not telling members what to do is it's also bad SACO practice to tell a member what to do, and then if they go away and do it and there's a problem, then they blame you for the problem. What you want to do if you're a coach is help the member make the best decision for them, but it's always their decision. And then if it goes wrong, it's okay, that decision didn't work, let's work with you to come up with another practice, another process, another decision, and see if that one works. So being a good communicator is giving information, giving knowledge in a way that the member can then make really good decisions for them. So a good communicator doesn't mean a really good talker. It means knowing what to say and when to say it in the appropriate way. And part of being a good communicator is also having good body language skills. Most communications experts will tell us that more than half of what we communicate can actually be from our body language. The smile on our face, the handshake, maybe not so during a pandemic when we first meet a person. All of the gestures that we have can convey a message. And so good communications is not just what we say, but the body language that we demonstrate when we work with members. And then the third thing that coaches really need is a process. So I have all this information, I have all these skills, but if I don't do them and use them in a logical order when working with a member, I'm going to go round and round in circles, and I'm going to waste a lot of my time, and I'm going to waste a lot of the member's time. So the process piece is, how do you logically, from the moment that you sit down and start talking with a member, what are all the things that you do in the order that you do them in, so that the member gets to the point of going away with a better understanding and a plan of what they're going to do in future. So I'm going to give you some ideas of what that process looks like. Okay, next slide, please, Maureens. So this is really the actual counselling process. This is what a coach or a counsellor actually does when they normally are working with a member. So the first thing is to actually build the rapport. So if you've never met the member before, and sometimes we actually know the member, we've known them for years because they've been a member of the SACO for a long time. And so getting to know them and making them feel comfortable with us as their new coach might not be important if we already know them, but if we don't know them, then that can be really important, you know. So it's building that trust, it's getting to know them. And so we might spend the first few moments just talking about life and ourselves and the weather and kids. So it's making that connection. And then the next piece of the puzzle is to ask lots of questions and listen to the answers to find out as much information about the member as possible. So what are the challenges they face? What's the impact of the pandemic on them been? What has it meant for their finances? What has it meant for their family? What has it meant for dislocation in their life? What has it added to their stress? So finding out as much as possible about the member and their financial position and their position as possible. Then the next step is to actually analyze that information. You get lots of information. Now, how do you put it in an order which makes sense? And then how do you make sure that you're on the same page as the member? Because the member could have given you a whole lot of information, and in your mind, you're thinking, okay, this is the member's situation, this is what they're thinking, this is what I need to do to help them. And what you might find is that the member is thinking something quite different. They either haven't communicated it correctly or you've misinterpreted. So it's really important to actually go back to the member and say, okay, let me make sure that I understand what you're telling me. And then go back and say, you know, you have these financial challenges because of, and you'd like to be in this position as soon as possible. The next step is then to help the member set some goals. So where would they actually like to be? What would they like to, where do they want to be in the future? And how would they like to, you know, what does life look like at some point in the future when financial stress is not part of their lives. That's really the sort of goal that you're wanting them to set. And then it's how do you help them think of all the ways and all the things that they need to do, all of the changes that they need to make to be able to get there. And then in putting together the changes and the things that the member would need to do, you're actually helping them build a plan. So you might be doing some brainstorming with them, they're coming up with ideas, you're making suggestions, and then the member decides on what they are going to do, and then you're the motivator that says, I know you can do it. I know you can go away and do that. You're the motivator, you're the cheerleader, you believe in them, and then they go away and do it. But before they leave, what you want them to do is to promise that they're going to come back and talk to you. It might be every month, it might be every 2 months, it might be just a check-in, depends on the severity of their problems. It might be every week for someone that needs a lot of hand-holding, or it might be every 3 months for someone who's doing okay and just wants to do better. But you want them to come back, you want them to talk about what they're doing, what they're achieving, what's working, what's not. And if things aren't working, then how do you help them readjust their plans, come up with new ideas? So that's an idea of the process, the sort of the logical order that coaches generally work in. Now, as I said, for some members, this is really detailed. If a member has severe financial issues, they're willing to work with you, they want to devote the time, this can take time, and this is all in detail. For other members, this can be a really quick process, does not take long at all. All right, next slide, please, Maureen. So when we think about the more detailed part about, how does a coach actually help the member in precise detail? What are the things that you're looking for as a coach to specifically help the member? And for most members, it's the savings, the debt, and the spending. They're the 3 pieces to any member's finances that are crucial in either the problems that they're facing, they don't have any savings or they don't have enough savings, they're in too much debt, they can't repay their debt, or they're spending too much in one area, or they're spending more than what they're earning, or they don't have a job because of the pandemic, and how can I spend money that I don't have? So helping the member work on these 3 areas starts with understanding how much savings they have now, how much debt they have now, and where their money's going, where they're spending their money at the moment. And obviously, another key part of this is income. So if the member has lost their job because of the pandemic or for another reason, then obviously serious financial problems because there is no income. For members that have an income, then clearly when you're looking at their income, then that links directly to, does that income provide sufficiently for them to save? Does the income provide sufficiently for them to pay their debts? And does that income provide for them to be able to live week to week and pay their expenses in their bill? So just a little bit on savings. A really good financial manager, someone who's good at managing their finances, when it comes to savings, they will have 3 different types of savings. Set aside savings are the savings that they would need to be able to pay the bills that come in, say, every year. So you might have a bill that you only pay once a year. You might have a bill that only comes in every 6 months, or a bill that comes in every 3 months. And a lot of people forget about these. They just live from pay to pay, and then one of these bills comes in and there's no money that's set aside to pay for it. So a person who's good at managing their money actually works out all of the bills that come throughout the year, and they set aside savings to pay those bills when they come in. And they're also thinking of bills that they don't know exactly, but they're pretty sure that something's going to happen. Some repair is going to be needed on a car, or a motorcycle, or a house, or a doctor. So having money set aside for that could be really important to a lot of people. Emergency savings, these are the savings that you need for a pandemic. So if you're thinking about, okay, how do I prepare for the next pandemic? If it arrives, then I know that if it does happen, I might lose my job for 3 months. Then how do I save enough money so that I have 3 months income? And this is really hard for a lot of people, even in developed countries like the US and Australia, for example. Not a lot of people have this emergency money. Some people do, but not a large number have these emergency savings. So it's, how can you put money away for when something really bad happens and you don't have income, like a pandemic? And you know, for example, here in the US, very few people going into the pandemic had emergency savings that they could use. And then the third piece is retirement savings. How can you help members throughout their life put aside savings so that they have money for when they retire? With debt reduction, it's really looking at the member, analysing their debt. What debt do they have? Are they able to make the payments? If not, what can you do to help the member in some ways, maybe refinance their debt or negotiate with the creditor to pay it off at a longer time, or put aside the debt until they get the repayments until the job comes back after the pandemic. And then having a wise spending plan is really helping the member analyze where their money is going and how they might be able to cut back in some areas and spend less in some areas, so that they're able to make that pay or their income or whatever money they have go further. So having a wise spending plan is really concentrating on money that needs to be spent rather than on things that are more like wants or wishes. So it's really focused spending the money on exactly where it needs to be spent. And then how do you help the member make decisions about changes that need to be made? Can I cut back on spending here, here, and here, which will allow me to put some money into savings, put some money into paying down debt, and being able to survive? So helping come up with a plan that addresses savings, debt, and spending is the really key work that a financial coach does with a member. And that's where a lot of the detailed work goes in. All right, next slide. So one of the other things that I wanted to mention to you is that when working with members, what you find is that quite often members don't just have financial problems. Either financial problems have been brought on by other problems, like a pandemic, or like a job loss, or a relationship problem, or an addiction. And then as a result of that other problem, then finances become a problem. Or alternatively, finances are the main problem, and then they lead to other problems. They lead to addictions or relationship problems. And so quite often when we're working with members, we might find that for the member to be able to get back on their feet, we're not just helping them with their finances, but they need help from other professionals or others in a community that can help them with issues that as SACO employees, we're not qualified to do. And if that's the case, quite often we can work as hard as we can helping the member with their financial issues, but unless they address those other issues, it makes it almost impossible for us to help them with their finances. And so it's really important that we help them get advice from others. So knowing our limitations, knowing what we can and can't do when working with members is really important. And then knowing how to diplomatically advise them to get advice from someone else about other issues. And then you can't really do that unless you know in your communities where they can go for that assistance, or even if that assistance even exists. And then the other piece is that, are there community resources that can help? So when you think about the pandemic, you know, what government services, what community services, what sort of organizations operate within your communities that are also helping people? And if the member that you're working with is able to connect with those services, that might be the most important thing that you do. So identifying resources and partners, and then once you learn that the member could benefit from those, how do you diplomatically refer the member to that organization, to that government department? All right, next slide. So what I want to talk about now is if you like the sort of things that I'm talking about, and you're not doing any of these things already, and you'd really like to get started, what are some of the things that you could do to do something immediately? So I mentioned earlier that if you've got staff that have been around the SACO for some time, and they have lots of knowledge and lots of skills, a lot of this is really comes naturally to them. They know this. They're probably doing a lot of it already when working directly with members. In particular, you know, key people in key roles in the credit union are best positioned to be able to have these conversations. So start with staff. If you can have a conversation with staff about managing their money and how can we all work together to help each other improve the way that we manage our own finances and learn more about the skills that we need to be able to manage our money better. A well-trained staff who are really good at managing their own money are going to be in the best position to be able to then talk to members, because members really love it when the person they're talking to can talk about their own experiences, what they did, how they do things. It has a lot more credibility than talking about, you know, what other people do or what the experts say. So it could be that you start off by focusing on, let's help our staff become the best possible managers of their money. And then if you're looking at, so then where do we focus our attention so that when in our day-to-day work with members, we can actually do this as part of our natural and normal conversations. So lending, staff that take lending applications. Here in the US, the two jobs that you will generally find have these skills and qualifications and do this are lenders and collectors. So the staff that decide whether or not to approve a loan or take the application to put to someone to approve, they're working with the member. They're having this conversation with members all the time, just in their job as lenders. And then the collectors, these are the people who are working with members who are having problems making payments. Then they're working with them to help them be better managers of their finances. So they're doing it not as specific counselors or coaches, they're doing it in their normal role in their credit union or in their SACO. And over the last 10 years of training people to become financial counselors, I probably played a role in training about 3,000, and I would say that less than 2% of the people that I have trained are actually doing this counseling full time. They're actually doing it as part of their job in the credit union. Their full-time job is something else, and being a coach is part of what they do as part of that role in their job. All right, next slide, please, Maureen. Now, there are some credit unions in different credit unions around the world that actually go beyond what I just talked about training staff to do this as part of their normal day-to-day job. They actually have full-time, fully trained staff who only do counseling or coaching. And so in virtually all of the cases where this is done, someone has developed a proposal, they think it's a great idea, they convince the leadership that they should do it, they train the specific staff that are going to be the coaches, they build all those partnerships in the community so that they know exactly who they will be working with in their community. They provide all of the resources so that these full-time staff can just do this coaching, and then they do a really good job of promoting it to the members so that the members know that this is available and that they can come and talk to these full-time coaches. All right, next slide. And I really wanted to finish up by impressing on you that yes, this is a really important program, process, thing that you can do for your members, and it can be invaluable in helping them cope with the pandemic. It can help them going forward in any situation at any time. It is really good for members. However, it's really also important to remember that this is really good for your credit union or SACCO, that it demonstrates that you care about the well-being of your members, and so it improves member respect and loyalty. Members really love the fact all over the world that they are members of an organization that doesn't just care about fees and profits, they care about members and helping them secure their financial future. If this is done really well, it can dramatically reduce delinquencies and charge-offs. So if members are paying their loans because SACCO staff are coaching them to be better financial managers and to make all payments on time and honor their obligations, that's a significant benefit for the credit union and its ongoing stability. If you also make a point of training your staff and having your staff being able to manage their finances, that dramatically improves productivity because staff who are financially challenged are going to cause problems for the SACCO. And so productivity and morale and all sorts of other problems can occur. So that's a huge benefit to the credit union or the SACCO. And then there are credit unions I've seen in here in the US, in Australia, and in other parts who have done this in a particular way where members want to join the SACCO, the credit union, because this is part of their process and it's also part of their culture. It's in many ways the ideal demonstration of people helping people, or we care about our members more than anything else. So I might leave it at that and throw it back to you, Grace, and perhaps I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Those were very insightful comments from you, very educative. And I believe as you are listening along, there's a lot that we have learned. Just before we get to the question, because I believe many of our participants will have questions to share with you. A couple of things that I found were strongly highlighted, and I believe will be very relevant and instrumental in our circles today, is that financial counseling programs are indeed should be part of our normal conversations. Before we get to the remedial and even the preventive phase of it, it's important that these are regular conversations that we have with our members. And indeed, no better way than to use existing staff, as you rightly put it, Mark, our lenders and even our collectors, because then that forms part of their normal conversations. So I believe when we look at it, then financial counseling to be a foreign term, because these are things that we interact with on a daily basis in our circles. I guess the next thing to do is just to be a little bit more deliberate about it and to just understand how best be implemented and how members can see it as beneficial even to the stability of the circles. But that said, obviously there is what we call a financial coach or a mentor who then comes with a little bit more expertise towards supporting members who have already found themselves in difficult financial situations, which really can be remedied, but obviously through some sort of work or a long-term course that helps them get themselves out of the mess they are in. Sorry, for lack of a better word. And it's interesting that the key aspects that the course tackles is mainly savings, debt, and spending, which indeed are the pillars and the foundation of that circle stand upon. So if members would not be saving enough, we would not have money to lend. And if members were spending in not so productive areas, then they would not have enough to save, and indeed kills the existence of our circles. So this, it relates to me very well that indeed these counseling sessions are a replica and indeed speak to very strong circles that then are able to stand the test of time, and even in terms of uncertainty like we face today, then they come out better to weather the storms that they face. I know this will generate a lot of debate even from our members, so I now encourage each and every one of us to please push in your questions as we allow Mark to respond to some of them. But before we do that, I would really want us to take a poll just to gauge the level of participation and understanding of our members today. We have been sitting in and listening in, and we really want it to be an engaging session. So I will quickly refer you to the first question on our poll. I hope we can all see it on our screen. If you're using your phone, please just look for an icon, a question mark icon, or just the word question on your phone and click it. You should be able to view the polls. Otherwise, it should come automatically either to your screen or to your phone. So first, the first question is, does your circle credit union offer financial counseling services to your members and staff? And the option will take just 10 seconds. Please answer it to the best of your knowledge. Is it yes, both members and staff? Is it only to staff? Is it no, you do not offer any? Or it could be any other response besides what you see on your screen. And if it's not, then please share the information via our email provided, info@accosca.org, and we will see that. Okay, I believe we've all answered the first question, so you could move into the next question. Okay, good. So question number 2, financial counseling programs have helped our members cope better during this pandemic. Okay, A, yes for you, they have been beneficial. Some, it could be that they cannot tell because they do not have the current programs. It could be any other response besides the 2. So kindly share with us your response. Okay, and the final question, Maureen, please bring that up. Okay, so this is our final one. In terms of lending priorities, which criteria would you consider most important? In terms of lending priorities, which criteria would you consider most important? A, guarantors. B, ability to pay or capacity. C, collateral. Or D, the number of shares a member has. Okay, so you will quickly answer that, and Maureen will then share with us the results of the poll, which you could then now open for discussion. Meanwhile, if you have any other questions, please take the opportunity to use the chat box, and we will respond to as many as we can during the webinar. If that does not happen, we will definitely get back to you after this. Okay, for the question, in terms of lending priorities, which criteria would you consider most important? This is quite interesting. So shares, 0%. So that's the least important in your view. Guarantors would come in second at 6%, and collateral, 16%. Then the majority of you felt that ability to pay or the capacity of a member to pay comes in first. Wow, that's really interesting in my view, and I would wonder if really this is what we do as SACCOs or as SACCO members here. Is it really in practice, or is it something that we wish we would be doing? It would be interesting to hear your comments. Unfortunately, this is not a webinar that we can allow everyone to speak. However, I must say that the responses are quite encouraging in the sense that a SACCO is as strong as its member. And for our members to enjoy the benefits and, with being a member, including borrowing or even enjoying interest rates on the investments, there are decisions that would have made at the onset that then give us that financial stability. And I couldn't have said it better. And I would want to side with the 78% who say that, yes, the ability to pay comes first. Whereas historically, SACCOs have relied on shares to lend to members. We need to go deeper and ask ourselves the question that indeed, if we were to lend out, especially during this pandemic, if we were to lend out all the resources that we had in form of shares, because our members are coming in and everyone, for one reason or another, has a need, it would be very hard for us to sustain the SACCO. So there creeps in the liquidity challenges that we have, there creeps in the image that we portray, and indeed we might find ourselves in a situation where some SACCOs are unable to stand on their feet. So it is increasingly important for us to look at sustainability, and we build our institutions to outlive us. And some of those are the factors that indeed we will consider. And I would not want to belittle the fact that collateral shares are important. However, we just need to categorize and see what then informs the best decisions to take. Things like collateral, for instance, would be very hard to liquidate at this point, which then puts a strain to the cash flows that we would have needed to better run the circles on a daily basis. So while we look at that ability to pay, it's obviously to sustain the cash flows that then help support the daily runnings of the circle. And indeed, I know that there are circles that would attest today that it's because their loans are being paid on time and consistently that they can still sustain their efforts to serve their members, even during a pandemic like this. Now, when we look at question 2, counseling programs, have they helped members cope during this pandemic? So 13% of you have an opinion besides the 2, and they have shared that through our website and our email. But 40% felt that they cannot tell because currently the programs are not in place. Okay, and 47% said yes, they have been beneficial, meaning that indeed 47% of us have embraced the need for financial programs. So we realized that during the conversation that we had with Mark, that there's a strong correlation between members who have financial health, members who understand the importance of savings, members who spend diligently, and how they then relate to their circles. So there's that importance of these counseling programs, and I think for the members who have embraced them, they're indeed enjoying the benefits of that. And for those that have not, it could have been that, well, there could be other factors that have affected the way the members relate to them. And as Mark had mentioned, yes, there is a financial counseling programs that are important, but could there be other factors beyond what you see as a coach or beyond what you see as a circle that could be affecting these members? So when we have such counseling sessions, then we are able to direct them appropriately. Could it be a medical condition, for instance? Could it be a family issue that is, of course, then affecting the level of a member's financial output? Through a coaching session, that can easily come out, and we will then be helping a member holistically. Okay, but indeed for us to, for the circles to be viewed as a tangible contributor to elevating member problems, I believe financial counseling is part of it, and it will play a role, not just to support members in terms of monetary value, but to address some of those salient issues that would make them better members as a whole. And of course, we will take care of some of the issues that some of us might be facing today, including panic saving withdrawals or a liquidity crunch in our institutions. Okay. And finally, I will pick the response to the last question, and maybe as it's coming up, I'll just share this, and I would request Mark to comment based on what our members have told us today. The last question was, does your circle or credit union offer financial counseling services to members and staff? So 65% said yes. It's offered both to members and staff. 5% said yes, but this is only offered to staff. And then 30% said no. The sessions are not offered either to their staff or their members. And with this, Mark, I would just wish that you'd comment or just share your views around some of the responses that we've had.
Yeah, I think On this one, this is really impressive and really important that if you have 65% who are already doing some form of counselling for members and staff, that is really impressive. I have no idea what the actual number would be here in the US or in other parts, but I think that certainly is an impressive number. I think any more than half tells a really great story, and I'm sure that for a lot of SACOs, it can range from being very comprehensive through to we do the best we can helping every member in every situation. So, but in terms of having that level of SACOs providing this sort of service, I'm impressed.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for that. Now we want to open the session to our participants. Please share your questions on the chat box so that Mark would be able to respond to some of them. Okay, so Mark, I'll throw the first question to you. And the first question is, a credit union with 60,000 members, how do you ensure you reach out to each member with financial counseling and coaching? Remember, each member is unique and requires individual attention. This is a question from Mercy, Uganda, I believe.
Okay, so where you have a very large credit union, I'm assuming that you also have a large number of staff, 60,000 members, then you're going to have a reasonable number of staff, and making the service available is obviously the first thing that's important, but also remembering that not all 60,000 members are all going to want to use the counselling service on the same day at the same time. I've worked with credit unions that have 60,000 members, 50,000, 20,000, all sorts of sizes. And one of the things that they find is that where all of the staff or a large number of their staff or key staff are trained, that they're actually doing this every day, that it is quite workable. And you're probably never going to provide this to every single member. Not everyone wants it. Not everybody at one particular time will. It might be that every member over the course of their life with the credit union might use it in some way, whether it's formally or informally. But if you have 60,000 members and you want to provide as much of an opportunity as you can for members to access this sort of service, then training every person on staff who interacts with members to be able to do this, particularly as part of their normal day-to-day work, is the best way to be able to do this for the most number of your members. Now, just to give you an idea of some of the other things that are happening in the US, there are organizations, some that are actually created by a group of credit unions that got together and they formed a separate company that just provides telephone counselling. So credit unions will pay a fee to this organisation, and then any of their members at any time can call a counsellor that works at this organisation and have a counselling session over the phone. And then some credit unions also have relationships with counselling agencies in their communities that they refer their members to. So if they can't cope with the demand internally with their own staff, then they have these outside organisations that can help them work with members as well.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Second question. Please don't get tired. I hope you're not, Mark.
No.
Okay, how can you manage members who feel they know it all and seem to be busy for your financial counseling? That's a question from Teresa. I'm not sure which country.
So, yeah, there are going to be members who think they know exactly how to manage their money or don't want someone helping them. And I think the best you can do at your credit union or SACCO is to provide the opportunity and provide it in, promote it in the most positive way and give members the opportunity to use it. And if at the end of the day they say, you know, I don't need it, I don't want it, and I'm not going to use it, then well, hopefully you've got lots of other members that are willing to use your services, and you can devote your attention to them. So yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to help every member. Some members are going to think they know it all. Some members are going to not want to discuss their finances. So really help as many members as you can in the best possible way.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. So this is from Tandos. Forgive me if I've not pronounced that well. Tando from Eswatini. And her question is, how do you ensure that there is a buy-in from staff to make this a deliberate exercise offered to members of the SACCO?
Yeah, this is a really, really good question, because I've experienced this dilemma on a number of occasions where the leadership of a credit union says, you know, this is a really good idea. We're going to provide this type of service for our members. And so they start to train their staff. And some staff really like the idea and can't wait to be trained, and then can't wait to actually help members. But then there are some staff who are resistant. They say, you know, this is not for me. I don't have the personality for this. I don't want to learn how to do it. I don't want to do the work. And so that can be a challenge. What I have found is that the more within your credit union or SACCO that you have a culture amongst the staff that it's all about, we're in the business of helping members, and you know, that's our focus. We're all here. We come to work every day to help members, and we help them in every way that we possibly can. And that's our culture. And by providing counseling or coaching, that's one of the best ways that we can do that. And so I think if amongst staff you have that culture, then it's a lot easier to get buy-in. On the other hand, you know, I've worked with some credit unions where the culture is actually more like a bank than a credit union. You know, we come to work, we do our job, we get our paycheck, and I don't really want to do anything more than what it says on my job description. If I'm taking loan applications, I just want to take loan applications. I don't want to have these conversations with members. That's not my role. So getting buy-in is really trying to change that culture to we're all about helping members. But there are certainly going to be some staff who are going to be better and are going to want to do this type of work versus some staff who are going to be resistant to doing it. And unfortunately, again, just like you're going to have members that don't want to be counselled, you might find that you are going to have some staff that feel the same way. And so, you know, as I said, my suggestions would be work on culture. But if the culture is fine and it's just the person that's resistant to it, then just keep working at it and hope that eventually the person decides that they get it and they want to do it.
Thank you, Mark. Sally wants you to shed, Sally from Kenya, she wants you to shed more light on the questions on the planner. Do your finances control your life?
Yeah, for a lot of people, their finances do control their lives. That's, you know, a lot of counsellors find that people's finances dominate their thinking. It's what they think about all day, and in some cases all night. You know, they're not sleeping because of the stress caused by their financial challenges. That leads to health issues. You know, I think something like 97% of all stress can be in some way tracked back to finances. And so, yeah, financial issues can really dominate a person's life. So that can be a terribly negative thing when you think about it, that people's finances are causing, you know, that much stress in people's lives. But on the flip side of that, think about, as a credit union, if we can help members better manage their finances and remove or alleviate that stress, we're making a huge difference in those people's lives.
Thank you. Another one from Godfrey from Botswana. He wants to know if it's possible to coach when you're not doing well financially, and what can you say to those who want to terminate due to such pandemic?
Can you repeat that again, Maureen? You dropped out halfway through.
Okay, his first question was, well, is it possible to be a coach when you're not doing well financially? And also, I think he means, what can you say to those who want to terminate due to such pandemic?
So if I understand the question correctly, it's you know, if I work for a SACO and I'm not very good at managing my own finances, am I able to help a member who's not managing their finances? Is that your understanding, Maureen?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, this comes up quite a lot. And if the credit union or SACO employee is not managing their money well, and they're continuing not to manage their money well, they're not doing the right thing, and they continue not to do the right thing, then they're probably not in a very good position to help anyone else. If they can't help themselves, it's probably very difficult for them to help someone else. Now that might not be the case always, because it could be, you know, sometimes people have financial problems because they make mistakes, but quite often people have financial problems because bad things happen to good people. And if you know, when you think about the pandemic has led to lots of bad things happening to very good people through no fault of their own. So if a person on staff is not managing their finances because they're just really bad at managing their finances, then okay, that's going to be a problem with them helping members. But if they're struggling financially because bad things have happened to them, but they're doing their very best under the circumstances and they know exactly what they should be doing and they're doing them as best they can, then I think they're probably in an even better position to counsel members, because they can be more empathetic and they're actually actively doing all of the things that they can think of to be able to improve their finances. So I think it really depends on whether the person on staff is either in the first position I described, where they're just struggling to manage their finances, or whether it's because of circumstances out of their control and they're doing all that they can.
We'll take 2 more questions, Mark. The first one will be from Uganda, Justin. He wants to know what assistance or what advice can you provide to an organization that was already in remedial state before this pandemic?
So is this a SACO or credit union that is having problems, or a member who is having problems before the pandemic?
I think maybe you could respond to both, if it's a member or an institution.
Okay, if the member was struggling before the pandemic and then as a result of the pandemic, their situation has got even worse, then clearly, you know, that's going to be remedial counselling in probably in an extreme way, and in that circumstance, yes, there may be, and certainly hope that there are things that you can do for that member to help them. A lot of it might actually be like, if a member, as a result of the pandemic, loses their job, they're already having financial issues, then they're going to be in a serious position, because even when they had income, they were struggling. Now they don't have income, they're struggling even more, and so that's going to be really difficult to help them. And I think one of the things that I didn't mention as I was going through is that there are going to be occasions when you're counselling a member where they've dug themselves into such a huge hole that it's going to be very difficult for a credit union financial counsellor or coach to help them dig themselves out. So sometimes it's going to be almost impossible to help them in any way, and you have to concede that in some cases that's the case. You can only do what you can do, and you can do the best that you can do, and then sometimes that's never going to be enough. For a credit union that was struggling before the pandemic, and now a lot of their members have lost their jobs, have lost their income, and are now finding it difficult or impossible to make payments on their loans, that is really serious, and that is probably the worst position that a credit union or SACO can be in. And I'm not sure I have any of the answers to help you do that, other than do everything that you can to help members make whatever payments they can on what they owe to the credit union, or hope that they're able to, immediately the pandemic eases or ends, that they're able to get back on their feet. And once they get back on their feet or start generating income, be there in a way that you can not only help the member, but help them start making their loan payments as quickly as possible. But that really is a tough one.
Thank you, Mark. The last question is from Babuka Ju from the Gambia. He wants to know from your opinion, what could be the resources that Africa could use through Accosca to build capacity of potential counsellors?
Well, one of the things I've learned from the work that I've done here in the US is that the trade association here, CUNA, created this financial counselling training program, which is the actual training program that I use when I train financial counsellors here. So it's a really good program. It teaches the sort of things that I talked about in my presentation. So it teaches skills, it teaches knowledge, it teaches process. So certainly, you know, there are already resources that exist. You know, they would need to be changed in a way that it relates directly to Africa and to African SACCOs, but the principles are still essentially the same sort of principles. And you know, providing some sort of formal training, and it could range from being very basic but really, really helpful, the sort of things that I've talked about, you know, just in the 90 minutes or so this morning, or it could be a more detailed program that you could create based on what's been done here in the US. But certainly, you know, the model is already there for a trade association to create a training tool that would help SACCOs and credit unions in Africa be able to train staff to have the skills to be able to do this or do a better job of doing sort of coaching and counselling that we've talked about today.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you, Maureen, for your relentless support. It's been an exciting session for me, and I believe it's been exciting as well to all the participants that were here today. We must also say that it was very informative, and just gauging from the depth of the questions that were asked, I believe it has drawn a lot of interest, and we will try to, you know, continue sharing as much as we can. And we still want to allow this session to go on beyond this webinar. So if you have any other questions that for whatever reason did not reach us or were not answered, please share those with us through our email, info@accosca.org. We will strive to answer them all. And obviously learning is continuous, so we know it will not end here. I believe one way or another, this has shed light into some of the areas that you can relook within your circles, and has also pointed you to the right direction. So in conclusion, I believe that we all realize that financial counseling programs are beneficial, not just to members, but to circles in equal measure. Why? Because our members will be equipped and will have a very strong basis to make the proper decisions, even when they're saving and even when they're borrowing. And of course, that helps us then to stay resilient, especially during uncertain times like we face today. And such will not go away. Today it is COVID, tomorrow it will be floods, the other day it will be fires or earthquakes. And as circles, we just need to be prepared for whatever uncertainties that are there. And what a better way than to equip our members with the right knowledge so that any financial decisions that they're making only speak to the health and the stability of our circles. And of course, there are consequential benefits that come with that, because then if our circles or our credit unions are stable, then we have a good image that would even attract more members who are not currently with us, okay? Some of the issues that we face today, including non-performing loans or liquidity challenges, could obviously be eradicated if indeed financial counseling formed part and parcel of our day in, day out activities. Okay, and finally, if we do not have this, the counseling programs, I believe this is a good time to reflect and develop some of the mechanisms that would help us promote either training sessions or appoint coaches across our circles or across our credit unions to really come in and support our members. And I believe a good place to start would be either through your national associations or through Accosca that is definitely here and ready to support. So with that, I would want to close the webinar. But before I do that, I just want to point to you that there's an upcoming webinar on the 15th of June, same time. And this will be a session that talks to the member experience, above and beyond service. So how is it that we can promote the levels of service and improve the member experience, so that we have even advocates beyond members, people who can bring in a lot more members to our side. So this is a session that will be conducted by Angela Prestil, and I believe we will all be looking forward to that. And as usual, we will always be there to support with any other questions that will come in between and even beyond this webinar. So thank you once again, Mark. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, our participants from all over Africa and beyond. We wish you well, continue staying safe. And we are hoping that very soon things will open up and we will go back to our normal way of doing things. It's a good evening from me and the Accosca team in general.